What's the most you've seen someone change from high school to your class reunion? This one girl was super smart in all the advanced placement classes, was on school council and all the smart kid clubs, always picked for any special outings like campus visits and symposiums. She came from a pretty well-off family, successful parents and all. I went back home to visit my parents and she's working at the local subway with track marks on her arms. I really didn't expect that from her. My high school boyfriend was the captain of the soccer team, held the record for the 2-mile run, was on student council and was voted Oscar character. He dropped out of 3 different colleges, law school, and the ESL program in Korea he was trying to teach. He's also done time in prison for sexual assault against a minor. I will always wonder what happened. Edit. Did not expect this to blow up. To answer some questions. He did get a BS at Terai Satellite Online School. After dropping out of honors college at elite state school and dropping out of not elite but still great state school. Another poster was correct. He got into one of the bottom law schools. It has a 10% bar passing rate or some garbage like that. The girl he assaulted was a 14-year-old neighbor girl who he assaulted. She came over to drop off her sister's laptop. He was 21. I learned all of this through a few high school friends who I still keep in contact with. Someone posted that getting freedom and not having his ass kissed was what did this guy in. They are 100% correct. My ex was the darling of my high school. He was also nominated for Homecoming King. And going to a place where he had to start from scratch broke him. I went to school with Jared Fogle, the subway guy. He was definitely not having sex with teenagers when he was in high school. A girl I went to school with was always picked on because her parents were poor. Her mother worked in a minimum wage job and her dad didn't work at all. TBH, I don't know how people even noticed her enough to bully her as she was always quiet and came in and out of class unnoticed. At school she always, I hate to say this, took the bullying and never once ever complained. That's the best way I can describe it. I remember her as always of average looks and intelligence while we were at school and very skinny. Once we left school everybody went their separate ways. Last year she surfaced on Facebook with a family and also a degree from Cambridge University. It turns out she had joined the army and went through officer training at Sandhurst and is a captain in the Army Air Corps. She has pictures of her tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. The quiet girl who got bullied was a very intelligent, tough person, who I suppose we all wanted to be ourselves. It was nice to see. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for the gold, kind strangers. Not my batchmate but an upperclassman. I used to go to a public high school where everyone was poor or middle class. Absolutely no rich kids. This is in a province in a third world country. So when I say poor, I mean down and out dirt poor. I made friends with this older guy who I always see on my walk to school. When I ask him where he lived he would always point up to the mountain. I always thought of it as a joke, but when he didn't show up for class after a really bad storm, rumors spread that his family's house in the mountains got destroyed. He stopped school after that and I haven't talked to him since. He finished high school the next year and applied to a prestigious university in the country. He took a finance course but had to stop a few times because of financial issues. He graduated 6 years later with honors nonetheless. Now, he's a regional office manager for a bank and he also owns a small travel agency. The scrawny kid from the mountain became a big-time businessman. Super smart guy at my HS got into meth and more and ended up dropping out. He was a total crackhead for several years and then became a born-again cowboy Christian. Not a class reunion, we don't have them. But there was a girl in my class who was really quiet, shy, always dressed super conservatively, never came close to breaking the rules, a bit of a Hermione type. I bumped into her, having not seen her for like 7 years, and she was totally different, covered in tattoos and piercings and dreadlocks. Almost didn't recognize her. There are at least half a dozen people in my class that have killed themselves or overdosed on drugs. Edit. Rip my inbox. I guess I can give a little more context. I graduated in 13. 4 of these people have committed suicide and 2 from drugs. All of them were from white, middle-class suburbs in MN. I'd rather not name the town. In high school this kid was the typical super athlete. alpha male who had a mean streak but always seemed to direct it towards the openly gay students. Came back to our 10-year reunion and was about as gay as could be. When I was talking to him, he came out after we graduated and he started college where he met his husband. He actually went as far as to apologize to everyone he bullied. I stayed in my hometown till I was 24 6 years ago and 4 years since I visited. So most of the changes I've seen have been through Facebook. The biggest change would be in a girl, let's girl her Sarah, who I'd been friends with since we were 9. She was always odd, but that eccentricity turned into full-on madness. She got heavily into drugs and by 16 she got into sex work and a whole array of other horrors. Anyhow, around 22 she had a kid and totally turned her life around. Before I moved I bumped into her and we hung out a few times. One night we got drunk at our local and I told her how proud I was of her and I said, "I can't even imagine what you went through." And she grabbed my hand and the pain in her eyes was like shards of glass into my heart. She just said, "You have no idea. No idea." And that was enough to indicate the level of trauma she experienced. She's 30 now and is still eccentric as hell but is a devoted mum and a successful local photographer and special event planner. Major kudos to her. Edit. Okay, there was no point calling her Sarah when I didn't call her Sarah again. I wrote it quickly. Edit 2. Haha, only just saw the let's girl her typo. One guy, legitimate child prodigy genius type, in a super competitive STEM program. As in, most of us are in 11th grade doing calculus and he's about 12, having skipped a grade or two and then is sitting in on a higher grade just for math class. His parents had a professor from a major university tutoring him after school, pushing him to do math competitions, the whole 9 yards. I don't think he got much of a say in it. It was what they'd been having him do since the age of 3 or so. His senior year, he'd had enough. He dropped out of the STEM magnet program and switched to the creative and performing arts magnet program. His physique was very much a computer programmer's more than a dancer, and he had zero experience with song and dance. He graduates, goes to a small private West Coast school instead of Harvard Yale like his parents had planned, majors in musical theater. After a year or two, that changes to journalism. Takes a leave of absence from school 2 years and to convert to Mormonism. Did I mention his parents were hardcore atheists, even though Mormons don't make converts do mission trips? He did a mission trip to India for longer than the usual mission. The last I'd heard from him, he was married and having lots of LDS kids somewhere on the West Coast. He's a fantastic guy, but if you'd asked me in 11th grade where I thought he'd end up, it would not have been anywhere close to failed musical theater major and Mormon missionary. Honestly, most people were mostly the same, just nicer and more mature. Also some people got fat, but that's to be expected. Was laying tile at a guy's house who I went to school with but was a year under me. His brother was in my older brother's grade. His older brother was the biggest drug guy I knew. He did any kind of drug he could since about 6th grade. He never graduated. His younger brother did and was not into drugs. I asked him what his older brother was doing now and he told me he owned his own insurance company. Could not believe it. A few years later I hear the younger brother had been left by his wife and he chased her down at a drive-thru and shot at her car and she sped away, causing him to run after her, shooting. He was eventually killed by the police. A girl I sat next to in homeroom for 11th and 12th grades was always really mousy and quiet. Long brown hair. Same jeans and t-shirt every day. At the 5-year reunion, there's this totally hot lady in black, high-heeled boots, dyed blonde hair in a razor cut. It was her. No one could believe it. I was lucky enough to move in the same social circles as she did for a few years and get to know her better. She was always a really cool person, but it was nice to see her come out of her shell. Super senior with a 1.1 GPA. At the 10-year he was finishing up a joint MBA JD at Harvard. Wasn't a reunion, but a guy I went to school with was always popular. The girls always liked him. He was super smart, funny, athletic. He was a golden child. I on the other hand was very nerdy, though I blossomed in college. After college a few years later I went to a party back home. I ran into this guy at it and it was great seeing him. The first thing he said was, "I don't know why I'm here. This party is too cool for me." I was aghast. The smoothest, coolest, most confident guy I had ever met was now this self-doubting timid guy. We talked for a while and I think he secretly was super nerdy and shy. But back then he forced himself to fake it. In college it seemed he finally was okay with just being himself. We started talking about old classmates and he said one of the nicest things I ever heard. He told me he didn't really keep up with anyone, but I was one of only a handful of people he was ever interested in running into over the years. He's still a great guy and he's one of the most intelligent people you will ever meet. And I gotta say, he may not be cool anymore but he's awesome in my book. My old friend in high school was a white girl who would dye her bright blonde hair black so she could try and pass for Mexican. She wore dark purple lipstick and lots of black eyeliner. She sometimes stole her mom's gun to carry around. I know. She dressed like a chola and only dated Mexican gangster guys. Fast forward 10 plus years later and she stopped dyeing her hair and let it grow out to her waist. She doesn't wear makeup anymore, wears nerdy glasses, dresses like a hippie with long flowing skirts and beaded jewelry. She's very mystical and earthy, and only dates hipster guys with beards. She's also a school teacher. She came this close to having a shootout with a girl in high school but you'd never believe it if you saw her because of how sweet hippie angelic she looks now. What a transformation. Eat her. She came from a very abused background and I think the gangster persona was to protect herself. The hippie person she is now is probably closer to her real personality because she was a good person inside. Just angry, confused, and hurting very badly. Hot girl was co-valedictorian. Still pretty hot but now sells health shakes or summit on Facebook. Very annoying. Also one of the guys who was a little weird and dumb to begin with got arrested for involvement in a child sex trafficking ring. The nicest, most soft-spoken guy died yesterday from a heroin overdose. Not a reunion, but those don't really happen in the UK. A fake. Long story short, a guy got expelled for punching me in the face and breaking my nose. It was just a petty squabble between two teenage boys. I think we were no older than 15 when it happens. Kid it. Anyway, I since moved away from that town and hadn't seen the guy since. Cut to about 4, maybe 5 years after the incident. I'm visiting back home and decide to go out with some of my friends from high school. We're in the smoking area of a bar when the guy who broke my nose recognizes one of my friends. They start talking without him noticing I'm there. Eventually he notices me. There's a long pause. Feels like forever but it's probably only a second or two. Is he going to hit me? Is he going to be angry? I go with my gut. I'm somewhat of a pacifist so I extend my arms to go in for a hug. He does the same. Somewhat of a beautiful moment. He apologized. We both agreed it was dumb we were kids. People grow up. He then proceeded to buy drinks for me and my guys the rest of the night. All in all, for a night's worth of Grey Goose vodka, I'd take another punch to the face. There was this kid in my high school who I would describe as alt-right before alt-right was a thing. He is one of those people who would taunt single moms and would berate me for having Jewish heritage, which is apparently a dirty race. He also had on his trumpet case a sticker that said my gun has killed less people than Ted Kennedy. Today he is super liberal with 4 adopted kids. Complete turnaround. There was this one guy who was a little awkward to say the least. Short, creepy, not the brightest academically, and was often the butt of every joke. Well, it turns out straight after high school, he borrowed a large sum of money from his grandpa and started a construction company. Company took off, and he is now living a very comfortable and flashy lifestyle. One of my good friends was a guy when we graduated. She is much happier now. The smartest girl in my high school class earned a scholarship to a highly prestigious women's college in New England. She lasted 1 year. Said her fellow students treated her badly because she was black and from a working class family. She then tried a year at an historically black college but the classes weren't challenging. I tried to talk her into attending the state university, but then lost track of her. Turns out that she never finished college. Met and married a man who's a minister, and ended up living in a small town in a rural area of a southern US state. Had 10 kids and now sells herbal supplements and shakes to make ends meet while her husband preaches. My graduating class, early 1980s, Also had 2 people go through gender reassignment. One was a young man who from a young age wore as feminine clothes as he thought he could get away with. It wasn't a surprise that he transitioned. The other person was a young woman who transitioned to male. No hints whatsoever. Best wishes to them both. I hope they find peace and happiness. One girl, kind of plain looking, gangly, once set the football field on fire during a baton twirling halftime show. Always teased. After high school, her father sold his business, a chain of grocery stores most Americans would recognize. Got millions. 10 years reunion. She is unrecognizable. 100k in plastic surgery. Married a rich executive at her father's new company. Absolutely gorgeous. I mean Playboy bunny gorgeous and sweet as can be. Unbelievably happy. Does it count if it's me? When I graduated I was 5 feet 9. When I went to my reunion I was 6 feet 3 inches. Prom queen is now 300 pounds and has 3 kids. It's really sad. She used to have 5 kids. Didn't go to my reunion, but it could have been me. I was a scrawny 6 feet 2 inches and 140 pounds going into college and antisocial. Now I'm a 200-pound social butterfly. This one kid was super fat. Didn't do well in school. Was always bullied. One time, during a pep rally, the kid was showering late after gym. The cool kids took him and carried him all the way to the rally and threw him in the middle of the floor with nothing but a towel on. This was senior year. 10 years later he shows up to the reunion in a CIA helicopter. Almost 6 feet 5. Ducking jacked. Almost a completely different person. Was sort of friends with this skinny kid and all he did was skateboard and smoke the devil's lettuce every day. Seen him a few years later and he's covered in muscle and in the army. Classic deadbeat tormentor Osana took care in the world. Blew off classes. Barely graduated. Antagonized everyone and was a bit of a bull. Iosa had gotten married. Had 3 kids. Established a stable career. Bought a house. And was 100% striving to be a solid human being. One of the most awesome moments of that reunion was realizing that 180-degree turnaround. This actually happened recently. Went to school with a very athletic guy. Lots of scholarship opportunities. Went to school. Then dropped out. Got 2 abuse charges against him, then killed a girl and fled to a different state. It's a really sad situation. I won't be going to any reunions. But I was an unhappy girl in high school and I'm a happy man several years later. One of my friends from high school has never showed up at the reunion. He was on the FBI 10 most wanted list for years. Someone brought ashes of a classmate. So from a living breathing human to a pile of ashes, probably the biggest change I've seen. Sat next to this super hot blonde at my 15-year reunion. She said it was nice to see me again. I asked if maybe she was married to or was dating an old classmate of mine. But no. She said she sat next to me all throughout grade 11. The catch? I went to an all-boys private school. They all get pregnant after we left school 5 months ago. Wild girl in college. Big drinker. Lived with an older married man, then dumped him and then became very involved in ministry. My high school bully used to be the toughest, most intimidating girl in school. At our reunion, me and another girl were sitting together and the bully asked us if we wanted a beer. We both said no because we were both, quite obviously, pregnant. When bully girl realized it, she was so embarrassed and apologized more than once. Later bully girl was talking about her boss and what a scary lady she was. It made me realize that she was still just a scared kid. It felt kind of good since I grew into my self-confidence and she left all of hers in high school. Paralyzed from the waist down. He was riding with a drunk driver who was also in our class. Not from my class, just turned 22, but my father said that one guy from his, and I'm quoting, gang, changed to a completely different species. He was the wild guy from his group. Always getting into trouble and somehow never got caught. He even made one street vendor pass for his dad so he could avoid a beating with the principal. But at the class reunion he was the straight guy, not a hair out of place. He joined the police department. He is a district general, 2 kids both in military school. Whole new guy. The fat, Loud and annoying guy became an astronaut, cowboy, millionaire, incredible transformation. From alive to dead. We were 2 months away from our 10-year reunion and the only reason why I was going was to see my childhood best friend. Instead I went to her funeral. I don't think I can ever attend a high school reunion now. I would like to think that I can, but to be honest she was one of the only people that I liked. We had known each other since age 3, so losing her was like losing a sister. Just isn't the same. Girl in my graduating class was destined to be the first female president. Very smart. Head of the debate club. Artistically talented. Charismatic. etc. She dropped out of college and is now a stay-at-home wife. Oh. And her husband is her best friend's divorced dad. This guy from my graduating year was pretty popular, but a total stoner skater type. 10 years later he's a cancer survivor, having undergone several organ transplants, but he's engaged to marry the girl of his dreams and he seems really happy. I hope his health doesn't decline again. Twin girls. In high school they were totally hashed out rockers. Way too skinny. Massive teased out hair. Denim jackets and rocker boots. No one had any interest in either of them. They did everything together and the few friends they had were utter outcasts like themselves. After high school most forgot they existed. 10 years later they improbably returned. Presumably for the sheer sake of delivering their comeuppance. As before they were virtually identical but now absurdly hot. Blonde, well dressed. Incredible bodies. Including what were clearly large, yet seemingly identical, breast implants. They flirted with every guy there. Mostly those who were least likely to give them a passing glance back in the day. After a few hours of pissing off just about every woman in the place they left just as they always had been. Alone but together. God damn them, they looked good. I went to high school with this one girl who died 2 years later after graduating and they never found her body. So yeah, that's a huge change. My best friend was normal. Sweet. Had a boyfriend for 3 years. Did okay in school. 3 years later was working at McDonald's having gangbangs in vans with Mexican guys. She didn't speak Spanish. Now, she's about 300 pounds. Unemployed. Living with her parents. Married. I'm not sure if it's a real legal marriage. Her father performed the service in their backyard to a girl who looks like a large boy. It's super bizarre. Short stereotypical Indian kid from our junior AP Calc class stereotypically goes on to becoming a portfolio manager of an investment fund. Dude literally pulls up in an Audi R8 and becomes the life of the party. He used to get bullied and made fun of in school for being short. And Indian, I guess. High school was ducked up, man. If I could go back in time, I would have stood up for the guy. He always seemed like a genuine straightforward guy to me. Never talked with spite, anger or resentment. Teenagers are cruel. Guess he showed them up in the end. I think I might qualify here. In high school I was clueless about my looks, never wore makeup, never did much with my hair. Clothes were pretty average. I didn't work out or play sports, so I was solidly skinny fat. Never had a boyfriend. In fact, was just totally overlooked by guys in general. Didn't even have my first kiss until I was 18 and away at college. No one asked me to prom. My school was a sports and academic powerhouse, but I wasn't a sports star or an athlete. The things I was interested in, mostly creative, were not valued. So all my hobbies were outside of school and no one knew about them. Fast forward to the 5-year reunion. I showed up in perfect shape, took up spin and barre classes, makeup, hair, clothes on point, joined a sorority and learned how well known in my creative career, and with a boyfriend who was a pitcher on our city's MLB team. No one could believe it. Suddenly all the popular people wanted to remind me of the good times. Multiple people asked for pics with BF and a few people who hadn't bothered to talk to me in HS asked for career advice and favors as if we were old friends. I basked in the satisfaction. Not gonna lie. Well, in high school I was 180 pounds. At the reunion I was 230 pounds lol. Our class prom king and quarterback ended up being a drag queen of New Orleans. He and his husband showed up at the 10-year reunion. So I knew this guy in school, super macho, bit of a jerk, always had some girl with him, a jock that really liked cars. The archetype high school alpha male. I didn't know too much about his family, but he's from a blue collar background. I knew his dad installed insulation, that's all I know. Almost a decade after we graduated, I was looking through Facebook for people I knew in high school out of curiosity. Everything seemed normal at first. Then I found his profile. At first I thought I had the wrong guy, but his relationships said otherwise and he had our class listed. Well, he turned out to be a flaming gay. No offense to our LGBT friends, but you know the stereotypes and he fit the bill. He had a master. His profile pic has him wearing a rubber gimp mask, and a recent update at the time was telling how he and his boyfriend met some guy at a convention suggesting they had an open relationship. It explains his homophobia when I knew him. But damn,